So we are going to go out on a long mushroom walk today. I've already had a little peruse around these woodlands over the past couple of days, and I've got lots of exciting finds to show you. So bear with me, let me get these shoes on and we'll go for a little walk. We got a flame shield down here and some deer shields just down here. Look at those. Boletes cervinus, I believe. Cervinus. Not great with pronunciations because I'm self-taught, but I always pop it on the screen so you can Google it yourself. How pretty. These are wood rotters, but that one I see quite a lot. This one, however, I don't see very much at all. This is the flame shield. Boletes aurantia rugosa, I believe. Aurantia meaning orange and rugosa meaning wrinkled, because it has this kind of wrinkled cap as it gets a little bit older. And this is quite a big one, to be honest. Usually they are a little smaller. We do see these in this woodlands most years, but this is quite a large specimen here. But this mushroom's got a lovely bright orange, fiery red colour, and it's a really good indicating feature of the flame shield. Let me get you a little bit closer and I can show you. The flash has come on because it's a bit dark in this tree trunk, but you can kind of see the stems from this angle. So can you see how vibrant? It's so beautiful. It really does live up to its name of flame shield, because it does look like the middle of this trunk is on fire from a distance. The flame shield is actually an edible mushroom, but because it's quite rare, or uncommon should we say, we don't pick this one. It's just one to be admired, but it is very, very beautiful. Quite brittle. This one's getting a bit older, I've just knocked a bit off. But actually this is quite a good feature of this genus as well, the Boletes genus, because they have very, very lightly pink gills to the underneath. Not especially pink, but a very, very faint tinge to them, not quite white. So that's a good feature of these mushrooms. And if I show you the deer shield, just down here, a little piece of this one, you can see how the gill colour is quite the same. But I've got some really interesting mushrooms to show you next, so let's crack on. This one might be the oddest looking mushroom that we see today. This is the cauliflower fungus, Spirasis crispa, and it's got this beautiful delicate kind of fronds to them that they fall off quite readily. This is an edible fungus, but it's very, very hard to clean, and this little guy here isn't in the best condition. It's been splashed up by quite a lot of mud and all of these heavy rains that we've been having the past couple of days. On another day I might take this back home to process it, but I don't need to add half an hour of cauliflower cleaning to my list, so it's not going to make its way back to the roundhouse today. These mushrooms are weakly parasitic. They're opportunistic. You'll often find them at the base of conifer stumps or even live trees that have had a little bit of damage, maybe from the storm or something. This mushroom doesn't have any toxic lookalikes, or any real lookalikes for that matter, apart from the other edible members of the Spirasis genus, so it makes it a very safe one to forage for. Look how vibrant this is. This is the yellow Stinkhorn, and it's another fungi that loves to grow in coniferous forests, so you'll often find it grown in the same sort of habitats as the cauliflower fungus. This one though isn't considered edible, not because it's poisonous, but because it's quite tough and rubbery. But there aren't any known toxins, so I can never help wondering if it can be used creatively in a dish, maybe as some sort of candied dessert topping, or some sort of edible ornament of some kind. I've never tried it, but I'd love to give it a go sometime. This woods has actually got loads of it, so I should probably make the most of it. But yellow Stinkhorn is a saprobic fungus, and it plays quite an important role here in the forest. It breaks down all of this dead wood and recycles it all back to the forest floor. We've got some Amethyst deceivers down here. Easily some of the prettiest mushrooms in the woodlands. These are mycorrhizal, meaning that they form mutual relationships with these trees. But they're not really fussy about who they partner with. You can often find them growing with beech or birch, oak, hornbeam, pine and even spruce as well. I still remember the first time I ever found these mushrooms. I saw them in a mushroom book about 15 or 16 years ago, and I grabbed my camera and went straight out looking for them in the woods. And to my surprise, I found them that very same day. I had no idea how common they were, or even back then that they were edible. Before foraging them, though, it's worth learning their main look-alike, which is the lilac fibre cap. When these mature, fibre caps have kind of rusty brown gills, while the gills of Amethyst deceivers usually stay a purplish shade even as they fade, but as the name suggests, they can be quite deceiving. Now, I haven't seen many of these compared to last year. These are the eggs of the Stinkhorn fungus Phallus impudicus, and they're such odd little things. They're often called witches' eggs. The mature mushroom actually erupts out of this gelatinous kind of egg, and I haven't got any in that stage here to show you today, but I'll pop in a clip of one that I saw yesterday. It was in full force. It absolutely stunk. But stinkhorns are fascinating fungi. I usually get the guests at the retreats to have a little look at these, and sometimes even try a bit of it as well. Believe it or not, these are edible at all stages, though it's actually the egg that's considered a delicacy in some countries. Inside there's a small white kernel that's quite firm and crisp, and it's that part that we usually take out to taste. But the guests here, they absolutely loved it. They were just eating the whole thing. But it's always quite a fun reaction just to see everybody slice one open and have a little try of it.
Like the brown bit?
I just tried it all. Just sliced a little bit off and just nibbled on it.
It's just the jelly bit is not going to be nice, basically.
I feel like that's okay.
Yeah.
I'll try it. It's alright. Yeah, it does actually taste like radish.
Really?
Does anyone else want any?
Yeah.
You want it?
That jelly is too much.
It's like
it tastes like radish.
It's like it's got jello, like a pork pie.
Pork pie. Yeah, maybe you could make a really sick veggie pork pie.
Yeah.
No, it actually tastes like radish.
That's what pork pies miss.
I'm gonna have a bit more.
No, it definitely tastes like radish. That's so
Really?
freaky.
Does anyone else want the last
try a
bit?
then.
Yeah.
Go on, go for. That's
This looks like the most magical place ever, and it's starting to feel a little bit like a fey trap. Crystal clear flowing water, the sun beaming through the trees with the fields in the background. Gosh, it's so pretty here. This is quite a cute and unassuming mushroom, right? This is actually responsible for the most amount of fatal mushroom poisonings worldwide, and it's been quite prevalent in the news recently. You might remember the story in Australia where a lady cooked up a death cap mushroom in a beef Wellington and killed her ex-husband's family, I think it was. But yeah, this is the death cap, Amethyst phalloides. The cap colour can vary quite a bit. It usually starts off this sort of yellowish, greenish, olivaceous sort of tone, and as it gets older it turns more of a silvery or bronzy sort of colour. The stem can be a kind of off-white colour, but the gills are always a pure white. The mushroom grows out of a sort of a floppy egg sac rather than a more stiff kind of gutted egg sac as you would find on the false death cap. It's another bloomin' Babyliss. Can't really complain, these are very tasty and we do use these quite a lot in dishes at our retreats, but I'm just hoping to find a couple more penny buns while I'm here. We've only found one so far, and just got my fingers crossed just to find a couple more. These ones are pretty easy to identify. They've got a kind of rich chestnut brown sort of bay coloured cap to them, yellow pores that bruise blue underneath, and a smooth stem that's kind of tan coloured. It's got no net pattern, and they love to live under conifers and beach on acidic soil, but if it blues quite gently and then fades again after a little while, then you've got a Babyliss. If you see any red whatsoever, whether that's on the cap, the stem, the pores, just leave it alone because it won't be a Babyliss. Now, have you ever seen a more beautiful or majestic birch tree than this? It is such a beauty, and it's a very special tree because over however long it's been living, probably at least 50-60 years, it's formed a very strong mycorrhizal relationship with one of my favourite mushrooms, the Amanita muscaria. Now, I haven't been around this tree this year, so I'm not 100% sure that it's going to be in fruit, but I've got a really good feeling because I have seen 1 or 2 mushrooms popping up in the woodlands just over yonder, and I know this tree has a very prolific fruitings of rings in the autumn time when we do have a good year. So let's take a closer look around and see if we can spot any little ones. Oh, I can already see some. Look, let me bring you closer. Can you see that? Look at those. And there's more just down here. There we go, some beauties. Check these guys out. Be careful not to trample any. Oh, what's this mushroom down here? Oh, I'll take a look in a minute. Let me look at the fly agarics. I can see that there's a young one popping up just by the grass here. There's a few broken caps here that I'll probably take back with me, and some beautiful ones here. Check these guys out. Let me sit down and tell you all about these beautiful mushrooms. Now, you will almost definitely recognise these or be familiar with them in some fashion, because these are the mushrooms of folklore and children's fairy tale books, because they're so beautiful and striking out there in the woodlands, and they do give off that kind of magical forest sort of vibe, don't they? They are absolutely stunning. Now, these mushrooms actually grow out of an egg sac. Can look a little bit similar to puffballs, but when you cut them open you'll see that kind of mushroom outline, and these are called the egg sacs, and this mushroom actually grows out of the egg sac itself. And the freckles or the speckles that you sometimes get on top of the mushroom, this one here has been completely washed off by the really heavy rain that we've had. Even though it's really undercover, we had some absolute downpours and torrential storms the other day, so I can imagine that that completely washed out all of the cap. But these speckles are actually the remnants of the universal veil, and as the mushroom grows up it bursts out and it leaves a kind of like a white patchy membrane on top of this red cap. We have a perfectly formed Amanita muscaria or fly agaric there, and then this one, you can see how it's just starting to pop out of its little egg sac, and you can see how the cap is here completely still covered in warts. Look, can you see these? And as the cap expands, it will kind of stretch out and break open and reveal the red cap that's underneath. And as that cap expands, that membrane splits open and causes all of these freckles or speckles or white warts that you sometimes get on top of these mushrooms. And I'll show you this one here in a second that still has got some of its little white freckles left. But this one has completely washed off. You can see a little bit around the edges here that have remained, but these can be very, very easily rubbed off by animals or rain. So sometimes they can be confused with russulas that are completely concolorous, like one coloured. I don't feel like I have to go into too much detail on the identifying features of this mushroom because it is so striking and well known. But if you did take a closer look at the skirt beneath this mushroom, this kind of drooping dress that it wears, it's striated, which means it has little fine lines that run down the length of the skirt. It also sometimes have a frilly base at the bottom, though this can also wash off. This skirt here is actually the remnants of the partial veil that used to cover and protect the gill surface beneath the cap here. And as that cap opens, the ring splits off from the edges and drapes down into this very elegant sort of dress. It's very beautiful. Something's already had a good nibble at this one, but look, such a beauty. You can see this one is all tucked under by the grass, and I'm going to just release that and help it a little bit just so the grass doesn't cut into the cap, because I'm looking forward to coming back in a couple of days, seeing how this one gets on. Can you see all the little remnants of the veil here? That is a gorgeous, gorgeous ring, just broken a little bit. Look at that. So they can vary a little bit, but as I say, you can't really mistake these mushrooms for anything else because they are so well known. Got lots more broken ones here, and I think I'm going to take some of these caps home. Look at these very deep gills. They almost look like pages of a book, don't they? And these leave a white spore print, as with most Amanitas. But can you see these speckles of the remnants of the universal veil on top of this cap? And if I scratch them, you can see how they come off quite easily. And you can see how a couple of really heavy droplets could rub this off completely. So I'm going to take this mushroom out from the base and show you, because this one's big enough. It's already completed its job of sporulating, and now I can show you the base of this mushroom. And can you see how it comes out of this egg sac, this frilly ringed egg sac? And this is very, very solid. But look at the gills on these, absolutely beautiful. I can brush this off as much as possible and pop this in the bag, ready for a tincture. I'm going to take this cap as well. This is a beautiful little cluster down here. Look at that, it's like a Mickey Mouse. So pretty. Can you see that patch of dark, lush green grass just over yonder? It's looking like a circle, isn't it? Let's have a look. It's the fairy rings. Wow. Check out all of these, all in the most perfect circle. Check all these out. There's a little gap here, but the grass is still lush in that ring. I'm going to put you on a wider lens so you can see. Yeah, you can proper see it's a circle now, can't you? Look how lush and dark this grass is. So there's a little gap here, and then they start again here, and they go all the way round in this big circle. So legend has it that you should never step inside a fairy ring for risk of being whisked away to another realm where time runs a little bit differently. It's thought that one night dancing with the fairies actually equals years and years in the human realm. But there's lots and lots of different kind of folklores and myths about these fairy rings. Some of my favourite are that these are left behind from midnight gatherings by witches. I think that's a German tale. But in Wales and Scandinavia, it's thought that these are actually left behind by a fiery dragon's tail that's kind of sat in the middle and spun around, and his tail's burnt and scorched the edges, leaving behind these mushrooms. It's also thought to be the devil's footsteps too in some countries. But these rings are actually formed in a pretty magical way. It starts with tiny little threads of hyphae in the soil that expand outwards, and they feed on all of these nutrients within the soil, and they end up fruiting along the perimeter after they've kind of expended all of their resources inside the circle. Now some of these rings are very, very lush and green because these mushrooms are breaking down some of the organic matter and returning all those nutrients back into the soil. But some rings actually end up withering the grass inside the circle, and it depends on which species. But these fairy ring champignons are known to create very lush rings of grass, so you can often spot them in the fields. So if I come down and part this grass, you can see all of the little mushrooms, and some of these are quite big for fairy ring champignons. That's quite a large cap size, I'd say. I'd often find them around the size of these guys. But these caps are hygrophonous, which means that they change colour upon how much moisture content is actually within the cap. So these have started to dry out a little bit, and you can see that they've become quite pale. But on a wet day, these can be a lot darker. You can see how this one is a little bit darker, and it's starting to pale up there in the middle. And you might notice that these mushrooms also have this kind of nipple on them, or an umbo, and this is quite a good identifying feature of the fairy ring champignon. They've got quite a tough stem, so I tend to take these off, and when I'm frying them up for breakfast, I just take the caps off and put the stems in a stock or dry them out ready for a stock powder or just to pop in soups and stews. But this is what I end up frying up for breakfast, and I'm actually going to collect some of these younger ones for breakfast tomorrow for some of the guests at the retreats. We've got a good patch down here. They're quite dried out, but they'll be absolutely fine. These are actually also called the resurrection mushroom because you can dry them out completely and then rehydrate them, and they take on exactly the same form and texture and taste as they do when they've been dried. They can actually also go on to sporulate and reproduce after they've been thoroughly rehydrated as well, which gives them the name of the resurrection mushroom. Another common name is the Scotch bonnet. These are quite easy to identify, but they do have a toxic lookalike. The most common one you might encounter in this kind of habitat is the fool's funnel. But the fool's funnel have decurrent gills, which means that the gills run all the way down into the stem itself. Whereas if you take a closer look at these fairy ring champignon mushrooms, you can see that the gills don't touch the stem. They're actually free of the stem there. It's quite a good way to tell these guys apart. And it's got this umbo, these gills that don't touch the stem there. It's got quite a tough fibrous stem and a pale tan kind of colour. Then you've got a fairy ring champignon. So I'm just going to collect a few of these little guys for breakfast tomorrow, and you can see that the stems are actually covered in this sandy grit. The soil here is quite sandy, which is quite a favourite for field mushrooms. Can you see all this sorrel down here? This is a delicious edible leaf as well. It's got a very zesty, citrusy flavour to it and easily identifiable by these little tails. Not to be confused with the Lords and Ladies, which grows in a different habitat. The leaves of Lords and Ladies also get much bigger, and they have a kind of margin vein round the edge as well, whereas sorrel does not have that feature. I think I'm going to collect a few leaves of sorrel as well, actually, just to garnish the breakfast with. Now these have opened up perfectly now. These are the shaggy ink caps, and I spotted these the other day when they were just tiny little babies, and they fully opened now. Look at these lovely bell-shaped caps to them, and these have started to deliquesce already. These mushrooms actually digest themselves. When the cap opens, it triggers a sort of self-auto-digestion response, and they start to kind of decay and spread the spores, and this is where all the spores are kept, inside that sort of inky slurry. But these start out as fluffy little egg shapes in the grass. They're very, very cute, and the cap starts to roll up at the edges and it turns into this very inky sort of mess. But you can actually make proper true ink out of this. You can just mix it with a little bit of gum arabic, or if you don't have that, then you can use a little bit of salt or vinegar as a preservative, and act as a binder just to help that ink stay onto the paper. But these are very, very gorgeous mushrooms. One really, really pretty feature to these is actually this tiny little ring or annulus on the stem. Now these actually move up and down, and when the mushroom starts to dry out a little bit, they start to get kind of a little bit skinnier, and that ring drops down the stem. Is very, very beautiful. But I've actually seen quite a few different ink caps today. The first were glistening ink caps. The caps kind of sparkle with little sort of beads or flecks on top when they're young. They grow in loads of tight clusters on buried wood. And just next to them actually was the common ink caps, and they grow on soil, and they were just next to them, just around the roots of the trees. And those ones are actually edible, but not if you've had alcohol 48 hours before or after. They contain a compound that reacts really badly with alcohol, and it can make you sick. But I also spotted, what else was it? The magpie ink cap. That is probably my favourite of all of the ink caps. It's one of the most striking. It's got these little white patches on a dark cap. They look almost hand painted. These ones aren't edible, but they're such a pretty mushroom. And like all the others, they deliquesce as well, turn into a sort of inky mess. I'm sitting on the edge of a giant ring of giant funnels. Check out the size of this guy here. This is one of the largest gilled mushrooms in the UK. This is the giant funnel, Asperopaxillus giganteus. And this is actually an edible mushroom. It's best off eaten when it's young, but it's best off identified when it gets to this size. This is a grassland fungi that grows in rings, and it's actually forming quite a big ring around this patch of gorse. We found it, or Chris or Joseph from Field Study actually found this on our foraging walk the other day, but it was 5 minutes to 12 and checkout time for my guest was at 12 o'clock, and I didn't fancy stopping and running over, but I thought I'd come back today just to show you guys. And it is a very, very beautiful mushroom. This is one of the largest here. They do actually get much bigger, and some little ones are just down here. And if you look behind me, you might be able to see a few more just forming this little semicircle. I had a little wander through the gorse, and there are some little ones popping up as well. But this is a really massive mushroom. If I put it to the size of my head, you can see that it's not too far off. So while this is an edible fungi, it is best off harvested when young, because it can cause a little bit of digestive upset in some people, and it does become quite tough and bitter when it gets a little bit older as well. The inside flesh is very white and unchanging in colour, and it's quite firm, and it's got quite a strong mushroomy smell to it. But at this size, in this habitat, and at this time of year, you can't really get this confused with too much else. Perhaps the trooping funnel, which does tend to prefer a little bit colder temperatures, so you'll often find that a little bit later on in the year. Perhaps also the falls funnel, but that is much smaller, and also perhaps the clouded agaric, which has sort of a grey, almost mottled top to it, but again they both prefer kind of later temperatures. You can see these smaller ones down here and here, and if I follow this ring around, you'll be able to see one here, one over here, and I did spot a couple more just around the back of this gorse. Look how beautiful this brown birch boletes. Look how dark this stem is. This is gorgeous. It's growing just underneath this big old birch above me here. All lechinums or lexinums are edible, and you can identify them because they are a bolete mushroom. They don't have gills, they have a spongy underside, or all of these kind of dark scales along the stem, which gives it kind of a shaggy appearance. When it gets bigger, you can see the white or creamy coloured stem beneath, and these dark scales are a lot more scattered. But when they're young, they cover the stem quite well. It's very well camouflaged. This little mushroom down here. This is a bigger one here, like that's been pulled up. You can see it's got those pores instead of gills underneath, or that scaly stem. Uh-oh! Can you see all of these little black bootlaces? That's honey fungus, and it's got quite a reputation for being a bit of a silent tree killer. It spreads underground through its rhizomorphs, which are often called bootlaces, which is what these kind of black things here that you can see. And once it finds a suitable host, the fungus releases enzymes that break down the cell walls inside the tree, and it blocks its ability to transport water and nutrients throughout the tree itself. So over time that leads to a decline and eventually the tree's death in a lot of cases. But there are at least 7 species of honey fungus in the UK, and one of them is very rare. They're not all detrimental to trees, only some of them. There she is, the false death cap. This is Amanita citrina, and you can see these veil remnants on the cap, and if you look closely at the base, it's quite swollen with this kind of gutter or ridge around the base of it here, and that is a classic feature of this mushroom, and it's what identifies it from the true death cap, which has got more like a floppy kind of vulva cup to it, and the smell as well is quite distinctive. It smells like raw potatoes, but the death cap has got a very, very different smell, almost kind of sweet. And this is the only parasol that I could still find in a good enough condition. Well, there was actually two. It was twins, but I broke one. But a few days ago, this spot here was absolutely full of them, but they've all gone over now. But it's such a beautiful mushroom and really delicious. We had them for breakfast quite a few mornings while they were still around. But this is the true parasol, Macrolepiota procera, and it is very tall and very graceful, and it's got a lovely snakeskin pattern on the stem. But it's also got this lovely double ring that slides freely up and down. You can kind of separate it from the stem and move it up and down. And this is one of those mushrooms that once you see, you'll recognise it straight away everywhere else. Its common lookalike is the shaggy parasol, which it lacks that snake skin pattern on the stem. When the flesh is cut, it often turns a reddish sort of orange colour, and it is edible for some people, but it can cause stomach upset in quite a few others, so it's best to just try a small amount for the first time. And I was just about to wrap it up and go home, but look what has greeted me just as I've left the forest. The most perfect little tiny boujon, henny bun, Boletes edulis. The most perfect. Look how beautiful and tiny it is. Probably could have left this to get a little bit bigger, but the slugs are pretty rife around here, and every other one that we found has just been eaten alive. So I'm going to take this as a little treat to myself for a long walk and a good first week of retreat. So I'm going to leave it here. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I shall see you in another one very, very soon.